Hello and welcome to This Week. I am Peter. It is great to be with you, and we are so happy that you could spend some time with us, either live or after the fact. This Week is a bi-weekly show on Saturdays at 2 p.m. UCT. We chat about everything from current events, from pop culture to politics. Hit that subscribe button to get all of the new content from Leaders of Africa on our YouTube channel, and the notification bell to be alerted when that new content is released. We are so happy for you to be with us today. Today we debut a new segment we'd like to call the News Quiz. Feel free to play along at home with us as we test each other's knowledge of this week's news. How is everyone doing today? How was your New Year's, Gloria? Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year, Peter. Well, my New Year, I feel like I'm having a very slow start to this New Year. I don't know. Coming out of a very intense 2020, I'm kind of taking it easy.
Wonderful. Yeah, hopefully taking it easier than last year. It was a pretty stressful year, but perhaps we could say that things have not started off any differently than last year, at least in these early days. How about you, Violet? How are you doing?
Well, I'm alive.
That's saying something, I guess. Well, hopefully you will still feel alive after I ask the first question on this week's news quiz. So you have the first question. So here we go.
I feel
on
attacked.
December 27th, this country held elections for president in the first round of legislative elections. There was also significant violence in this country's elections. What country is it?
Ghana.
A little bit more in the central part of the continent. Does anyone know?
Yeah, is it Central African Republic?
That's right,
Yes.
Central Africa Republic. So they held elections for president, and they have just recently confirmed the incumbent president as their victor with 54% of the vote. So Central African Republic. My next question is to you, Ghana, and this is a continent-wide one. On the first of this year, so we rang in the new year, on the first of this year, this continent-wide agreement went into effect. And as a hint, your home country first opposed this continental agreement at the very early phases. What was that agreement?
You know, we are the big brother in Africa, and we've always been the big brother. That's African Free Trade Continental Agreement.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That's right. So on the first of this year, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, or AFCTA, went into effect. And of course, we're going to see this year, and we're going to be monitoring as a group whether that's going to bring countries closer together on trade, on infrastructure, as well as maybe in the political realm as well. So you got the question correct, Ghana. And over to you, Eva. This one's a little bit harder. You got a little bit of a harder question. 23 prisoners were pardoned in the Democratic Republic of the Congo for doing what in the early 2000s? So just what did they do? What landed them in prison? And I can see Gloria's already smiling. She knows this one. But what did they do?
I think it will be inciting some kind of civil war or engaging in conflict.
Close. Gloria, you wanna add? Or actually, I should say Violet or Ghana. Do you know the answer? Not so much, Gloria. Do you want to tell us?
Yeah, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think this group of prisoners were linked to the coup that killed the president Laurent Kabila in 2001.
That's absolutely correct. Yes. So the current president of the DRC, who's having a rift with the son of that former president, Laurent Kabila, who was killed, are having a bit of a rift right now in government. And I'm sure at a future show, we'll talk about the dimensions of that conflict. And part of that sort of rift that we can see is that pardoning of those who were allegedly, or according to the domestic courts, involved in the murder of Laurent Kabila, the former president. And Gloria, lastly, for you, you get our last question from a slightly different genre. Two dwarf what? So dwarf whats have been discovered in Namibia and Uganda. And I can give a hint. These are usually very tall animals. One of the big five.
I don't know. Elephant, giraffe.
Giraffe is
It's
correct.
giraffe.
We allow second guesses. That's right. So they discovered two miniature giraffes, like sort of a variation of giraffes that were small, sort of like if you think of a horse, they were like a pony version of a giraffe. So that's our news quiz today. Gloria, thanks, and everyone for playing along, and at home for playing along with us. Now let's talk about what's on our mind. Gloria, since we ended with you, what's been on your mind these first few days of the new year?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of news, of course, to consume during this time. But one story that stood out for me, again, it touches on technology and issues of privacy. We talked about it in one of our shows last year. But this specific story takes us to South Africa. So the South African Department of Home Affairs proposed a new policy which is going to record biometric data of every child born in South Africa. So basically, when a child is born, the government is going to take their fingerprints, take a picture of them, and collect any other unique identifiers and store that in the database and link the baby's information to the parents' identity numbers. So it is, at this stage, it is a policy. Of course, when we talk about collecting and storing such personal information, we need to discuss the issue of data protection. We need to discuss the issue of privacy. And so that's the story that I came across. I was just, I was curious to learn more about it. I don't know what you guys think about this.
Yeah, what do we think about this? So, collection of biometric data at birth. Yeah, Violet, go ahead.
Well, if you look at it from a service delivery standpoint, it does make sense because a government needs to know exactly how many of its citizens it has and what their age ranges are and other demographic information to be able to effectively deliver services. However, I think that the main issue that you brought up is privacy, because I know that many times our governments do collect data, but they don't do enough to, one, educate the citizens about their privacy concerns, rights, and responsibilities. And then secondly, sometimes they don't do enough to protect data. Because I know that in the past, South Africa has had a massive data breach. And I think the hackers actually told the government that they would have this huge, massive data dump if they did not pay the ransom. Issues like that, precedents that have been set in the past to rightly concern citizens at this point. And then, well, Africa has not been known for very democratic regimes. So sometimes it is reasonable that people might worry about what the government might do with this information if they end up in the hands of a more authoritarian regime. So I think those are very valid concerns, but fundamentally, I don't see anything wrong with it, because when it comes to a service delivery standpoint, we do need this data, we need this information.
Yeah, maybe I should add and maybe provide a bit more background information on this policy in South Africa. And before I do that, Violet, you are completely right. Service delivery is very important. That's actually one of the main motivators of people who support digital registers. But in South Africa, one of the reasons why the government is proposing this is so that they can stop corrupt officials from selling fake birth certificates to people who are in the country illegally. Of course, they've discovered that this is a major problem, and one of the ways that they can stop that from happening is to create this digital database.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that shows the government is trying to protect the interests of citizens, which it should do, because that is its mandate as government. Because we all know that many times, especially during election time, certain governments do certain government officials getting people from others to come and vote. There have
Yeah.
been rumors of that in Uganda and in other places as well. So if the government is trying to get streamlined from the very beginning, I think that's a step in the right direction. And then I also think that the way that the world is going in terms of technology and AI, we're heading to smart look at the trajectory of, okay, the more westernized countries, but then also for Africa, pressing technology and for service delivery, but as well as connectivity and getting things done. We are heading towards more smart cities, and we can't have smart cities without all this infrastructure fundamentally in place. So I think that the government would need to, at this point, effectively address the concerns of citizens and provide adequate reassurance that you're able to protect the integrity of this information and nothing nefarious would happen to it. Because in my opinion, I feel that the fundamental reason for collecting this data is altruistic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so my concern is this. I appreciate those points, Violet, but I have a bigger concern, and that is the discriminatory outlook of the policy framing in South Africa. We may want to recall that South Africa has consistently, over the years, been in the news, for discriminating unnecessarily against fellow Africans. And I can see this playing out in this particular policy. If you want to ensure that citizenship is not being sold or abused or is not being racketeered, there are ways you can do that. You don't need people's biometric to be able to do that. What you need to do is to strengthen the crookedness in the birth certification registration process. It's so basic. We all do this. When people give birth in the hospital, what you need to do is to have that information system that captures the details of the birth that is being given, the parental details, the father and the mother. You just need to put that right. You don't need biometrics to do that. And that goes back to the information system in the hospital system in South Africa. If they can do that, then that can address the problem. I've been following this story, and what I've seen over the story is the fact that South African is here to learn from this issue of racial discrimination against the other people from different part of Africa, because when they speak exclusively about this, when they speak to this issue of citizenship racketeering, it mostly applies to fellow Africans. And, I'm happy that our colleagues over there in South Africa were rising up to debate and tease out the racial and discriminatory element enrolled into this particular policy. The issue of people's biometric is a massive one. Sometimes it could be an issue of intrusion into people's privacy. And they are not too open and transparent about the way they are going about this. And I'm afraid that they might be laying down a very bad precedent for other African countries.
I think personally, I think that this is needed. I think that the Ghana may have a different perspective about it, but looking on the continent in general, most African countries do not have accurate database of their citizens. So it become an issue every 4 years in Ghana. There have to be some voters registration. And not just in Ghana, a lot of African countries, they have to go through their voters registration to make sure that the people that are dead are taken out, the people that are alive are included. And sometimes they have to cancel the whole voters registration for people to re-register again. So this has been an issue. And this is a lot of money that is being spent every election year. So for me, if South Africa can come up with this database that can capture the information of their citizens, and so that they can use the information reliably to, as you guys say, for service delivery and also for identification purposes, I think it's good. And the concern that has been raised has to do with privacy issues, because lately there are a lot of hackers that are even hacking. Top governments like the United States had issues with hackers. So privacy issue is a major concern. But when it comes to database, I feel like that is a place, or that is an issue that African countries have to start thinking about investing in them massively. We have to, because that is costing us a lot. We don't have accurate information on what is going on, even with coronavirus like this. Some people are saying the information is right. Some people are saying that this is just an estimation of things. But if we have a database that is able to help us track what is going on the continent, track our people, it's going to help us avoid a lot of things. And I also, for me, this initiative by South Africa, I feel is very important because there are issues even in Ghana where I can get birth certificate by just going to the roadside for someone to fill my birth certificate, and they will get a proper signature of a judge, of someone, the seal of the coat of arms of Ghana on the birth certificate. So this is a lot of issues. So imagine what they are talking about, that it's easy for people to buy birth certificates and other things around. And it's an issue all over the continent. Even in Ghana, we've had issues where foreigners have changed their names to Kojo, to Ghanaian names. But if you are speaking to them, you know that they are not really Ghanaians. And a Ghanaian, actually helped them to obtain Ghanaian passports, Ghanaian documents to stay in the country and things like that. I don't have issues with them staying, but I just feel like they have to go through the right channel. But when you have a system where you don't even have databases, you can't even track your people well, then some of these things will take place. So I think it's a good start. There was going to be issues from the beginning, but as they build on, as they move forward, it's going to help them to eliminate some of the issues that we are actually raising here and some of the issues that will crop up in the near future.
So, Eva.
Yeah, go ahead, Ghana.
Yeah, to me, the question is this. What kind of information do they need to be able to track who gave birth to who in a particular country? To me, it's so simple. It's not rocket science at all. When I give birth to a baby in the hospital, I identify myself as the father. There's no controversy about that. The mother who carried the pregnancy and delivered of the baby identifies herself as the mother. So you have this information. You don't need any biometrics to do that. So Ghana, with Mrs. Ghana, gave birth to a baby named so at a particular point in time, and that goes into the information system. I don't think they need a biometric capture to say that Father Ghana, Mrs. Ghana, gave birth to baby Ghana. I don't think anybody needs this information to be able to get this information. And that is why we need to have.
No, I think you are right.
Why do we
right,
do
you are right.
Go ahead, Eva.
I think we do need this kind of...
I think you are right to say that they don't necessarily need biometric information to identify parents, right? And also that raised a lot of concern in terms of, as we were talking about, who get hold of this information if there are data breaches. You get it? So that is a concern. Nobody needs a biometric data to be able to identify who gave birth to this. The parents will be able to tell it. And also at the hospital, they have records. But as you understand, there are a lot of breaches in the system. They've seen that people are taking advantages of this. And actually, there have been cases where people have given birth at hospital and the babies were found in the hands of wrong people. Selling babies at hospital is also another issue, right? So you are right to say that they don't really need biometric information to identify who gave birth. A lot of developed countries don't even need take biometric information of babies and things like that. They don't. But they've seen there are a lot of, with the loopholes we have in our countries, there are a lot of ways that people can scheme the system to their advantages. So we have to find a way to close up these loopholes. That is a major concern. But for me, biometric information would not necessarily be an issue, but because there are a lot of loopholes, how do we close these loopholes?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things, Eva, you brought up about the babies issue there, and I know on Netflix and other places there have been these conversations about that, right? And we also have this broader issues of human trafficking, of dislocation, and things of this nature. Perhaps one could make the argument that this would help in solving some of those problems of identifying people, reuniting people when processes of dislocation take place. And hopefully we prevent that at the beginning, right? Of course, this is not something that we want to rely on to sort of to fix those issues. But I think that there's something there. I think the other point that is sort of been raised that's important is, why are we using biometric means? And I think we see in other areas of sort of management of state function that biometric data is becoming important. I know in elections, a lot of countries have gone to taking photos, taking thumbprints and fingerprints so that when you go to the polling station, you're identified by that biometric data. And a lot of these governments may be saying to themselves, well, we just don't want to have to, re-register people again. Let's just, do the whole biometric piece at the very beginning. So that way we don't have to keep doing these processes, and doing and sort of saying, oh, now we want to do biometric. Now we're going to do it. So there may be a little of that. But of course, there are plenty of countries around the world who do not use, and I think this goes to Ghana's point you were mentioning, do not use biometric means of registration. They do use biometric means of, say, getting a passport or other documents. But, in terms of births and sort of deaths and those registries, they don't have to do that. And there hasn't been even a push for that either. So maybe this raises the broader issue, and we've been talking about the real motivations for a project like this. Ghana, you had something to say and jump in there.
Yeah. So the other point I have is this. From a planning perspective, particularly when you do the cost benefit analysis, it's just not being cost-wise. It's not a cost-smart decision for them to do, particularly if the biometrics that they are capturing at that level still needs to be captured at other level. For example, I want to believe that some of these parents, they have their biometric already captured. And for the kids, the newborn baby, if you have to go for your passport, from my little experience in South Africa, your biometric still needs to be recaptured again. So why do we need to be wasting money at different layers? But the point is this: if there are crookedness in the system, technology for the most part is not a solution to crookedness. Just like people talk about voters fraud and all of these things, technology don't actually fix the issues of voter fraud for the most part, or the issue of plagiarism. Just like, we teach some of our students that when you want to, it's better for you to learn what constitutes plagiarism. So the question I'm going to put to them is that, what are the issues, drivers of this crookedness in the system? Is it because there are institutional lapses? If the problem is out of institutional lapses, fix those institutional lapses. Technology may aid the process of fixing the problem, but it's not necessarily the solution, because this concept of technological determinism, getting this information, getting that information, from the little that I've understood, is not actually assisting anybody to solve many of these problems that we are dealing with. So to me, what I would push to them is this: let them perfect and fix the issues with their birth recording system. They gave birth to this at so point in time. Let it be properly captured. That's all the information you need. It saves time, it saves a lot of money. And that's what I'm going to propose in South Africa for now.
Yeah,
I have a question.
Go ahead, Gloria. Then Violet, jump in.
Yeah, Ghana raised a very important point that has to do with South Africa's history with xenophobia. We know that so many of the policies and the laws, and even individuals who took it upon themselves to go after Africans from other nations who are residing in South Africa. And for me, I would say this policy needs to address certain concerns. One of the things that this policy proposes is that the child's fingerprint and biometric information is going to be linked to the parent's identity information. But reality is that some of the kids that are born to parents who are illegal, the parents doesn't have ID information. So what's going to happen in that case? And you may create a case where an illegal person in South Africa is pregnant, is afraid to go to the hospital because that is going to be one of the ways that the government is going to trace it. So there are so many issues around this policy that need to be addressed, and before it can be implemented. The second most important thing is, yeah, we can collect biometric information and all of that, but Africa still has issues when it comes to cybersecurity. The first thing will be to strengthen infrastructure and frameworks
Yeah.
when it comes to security, protect our systems, our technology first, and then we talk about collecting people's information.
Wonderful. So I
So
think
I did
Gloria
have
gets the last word on this. Violet, do you want to jump in first?
I did have a question, but it's okay. We can continue.
All right. So, for the sake of time, let's continue and kind of shift gears away from our discussion of privacy, technology, and we really touched on a lot of things. This issue of biometric registrations, it touches on so many issues. But let's move on perhaps to something different. Eva, what's on your mind? What's been on your mind since the New Year's has passed?
Okay, so it's been a crazy start to the new year. We thought that most of us thought that going to the new year is going to start with a lot of good things. Yeah, it's been good. We are alive and all that, but we've had a lot of events that has actually rocked the whole world. And actually, in Ghana, for instance, this week happened to be a transition week where there was a swearing inauguration ceremony for the president. But it led to another issue where in Parliament they were supposed to vote for the Speaker of Parliament, and there were a lot of issues. There were a lot of infighting because there was a lot of disagreement. And as you see the picture there, they have to bring the military in to quell the situation in parliament. But the interesting thing for Ghana going forward is that we have an issue where the opposition and incumbent has the same number of seats in parliament, and there is just one person who is an independent candidate, and also the speaker of parliament was elected and happens to be an opposition person. So it's going to be funny. How are you going to run a country, the president going to run a country with a parliament that is divided, and also you have the head of speaker from the opposition side of things. And the deputy is an independent candidate who has pledged to work with the incumbent party. So we'll see how things unfold in Ghana. So we'll see. I like it though. A lot of people like the idea that it's a divided government, and we'll see how things run out. And another thing that happened. Okay, do you want to say something before I
I
go
was
on
going to
to the
say it's a very unique situation of a divided government. You don't see that often. I know in the DRC, it's sort of a situation of divided government where the parliament is generally sort of aligned with one political faction, and the other one is the president. In the case of Ghana, it's even more complicated because it's not even sort of clear divided government, but like equal MPs. So like really divided in the legislature, and then you have the president, and then as you mentioned, there was this sort of situation where the opposition was the speaker. Now I saw something interesting, Eva, to this effect. On the first day of Parliament, and it was something that was going around social media. So perhaps you can help explain this. And I'm gonna have this picture put up here. It's this picture here of two parliamentarians, one lady sitting on this man's lap, and it was characterized by others in Ghana. You can see here somewhere putting up some comics here. So Eva, if you don't mind, sort of explaining to us. What was that all about? Why did that become such a viral thing on social media?
So it's funny. So the opposition decided to go to parliament early, and they all wore white. So when they got to parliament, they sat at. I heard that they went to sat at the place of the majority, like say the incumbent party. So when the MPPIs came in and were like, they've seen that their place has been occupied. Some of them decided to sit at the NDC side. So I heard that this woman, that is where she always sits, and that is where she wanted to sit. And actually, she was sitting there. She was sitting on that chair from what I heard. Then she stood up. Then this guy went to sit there. So when she came, she was like, she just went to sit on the guy. So it became a funny scene, and it was like, what is going on here? People were just making fun of this guy. And also they were like, man, you were able to carry this woman and this like that. So it became like a meme. just laughing at the guy, and it's all over. So the guy actually have to come to the news to explain himself, like what happened, and is the wife not afraid? Is the wife like okay with that and things like that? I mean, it wasn't a big deal. It was just a little bit of misunderstanding, but at the end of the day, it was resolved.
That's an interesting story. I'm curious, Eva. I saw the military was called in. Was that very violent? What was going on in Parliament? I mean, is it something that you've seen happening before?
No, this is actually the first time we've had this chaos in Parliament. And what happened was that I think when they were voting for the Speaker for Parliament, there were some people there was a guy, there was a fight that broke out because a guy, I think a guy went to steal some of the ballot paper, like the ballot paper that was cast and was run away.
For the speaker, right? It was the ballot paper for
something like
those
that.
voting for the speaker,
but
right?
But initially there've been a lot of tension going on in Parliament. So there's been a lot of misunderstanding because of what is going on, and also because of the election related issues that we have, where the opposition is not said they will not recognize the president because they feel like the election was not fair and is in court at the moment. So when they came to Parliament, that was on Wednesday, there've been a lot of issues going on. So they brought in the military to quell the situation, to ensure that there is order there, and actually the guy that actually went to pick the papers was actually from the MPP side, and people jump on him and they're trying to beat him up and things like that. So there have been a number of issues going on, a little misunderstanding. So they came in to resolve the issues. Now everything has gone to normal, but it's rather unfortunate that they couldn't resolve this in-house and they have to bring in the military to quell the situation. So right now, what Ghanaians are demanding is that Ghanaians on social media, when I was reading yesterday, are demanding that the parliamentarians apologize to Ghanaians for doing what they did to us, because that was not really a nice scene that was portrayed in Parliament. So we'll see about that.
Well, although
our politics have come to, it feels like I'm seeing these pictures in different parts of the world. It's kind of exhausting that our leaders are not able to just come together and just get things done in peace. And sometimes it's the public that gets involved. It's too much.
Yep.
I mean, to me, politics is what it is. It's a process. And the process doesn't mean that it has to be smooth. If it is smooth, it's not going to be natural, because it revolves around this question of power. And when you look at the chemistry of power, particularly when it comes to the stage of appointing leadership, it comes with a lot of emotions. It comes with the issue of interest. It's interest before anything. And to me, this is understandable because you have a situation whereby you have 50-50 on both sides. And then there is a tiebreaker, who's the independent candidate. What that means is that everybody is like on the edge, like who is this guy going to vote for? Particularly when you are sure that the 50 on your side is going to vote for your candidate, and the 50 on the other side is going to vote for another candidate. So all eyes remains on that guy who casts the deciding vote. And so the way they managed it, to me, I think it wasn't that negative, because when you look at the optics, it's not that it's bad. It's not that people were throwing punches. It's not that people were fighting one another. It's just the fact that it looks a little bit rowdy, and which is natural to me. I mean, if it is too smooth, then it will be something that is stage managed. And that's why I always tell myself, I think sometimes you have this heightened expectation of what a normative process should look like. And I've always learned to be natural. And for issues such as this, I expect some tension. At least they did it better than what we've seen from the United States. When you look at what people are seeing from the United States compared to what we saw from Ghana, you begin to see that democracy seems to be more stable in Ghana currently compared to the United States. Because we were able to handle this process, they never brought in touts, they never brought in rioters, insurrectionists to come disrupt the process. It's a process, that went about, because when you look at the situation and you compare with the situation in the United States of America, somebody is disputing election over there. And in Ghana, people were concerned about the process as well. In the US, it's also about the process, but they couldn't manage it better. And people have to come in, they have to send, close down the Congress and what have you. This never happened in Ghana. So to me, that's a plus. And that's telling me there is something that countries like the United States can learn from how we are handling differences in Africa. Even when the police guys were brought in, it wasn't that they were shooting at people. It wasn't that they were running after people. So the way they manage it, the level of sophistry, I mean, it's not what we want. We still want something a much more improved version of that. But to me, it's telling us that we are learning to we are beginning. The world is beginning. Should be looking in the direction of Africa to see what they can learn from how we are managing the process and beginning to show to the world the stuff that defines us as a people and as a continent.
Well, I don't think it takes much to do better than the current president of the United States just stay off Twitter or be forced off Twitter.
Okay, I want to
that's a start.
I actually want to jump in and ask Ganda's point of what happened in the US this week. I mean, this past Wednesday, it was an eyesore, and actually a lot of countries reacted to that. And one funny thing is the president of Zimbabwe wrote something on Twitter, and I want to read it to you so that we can discuss about what you had. So, President Mnangagwa said that last year, President Trump extended painful economic sanctions placed on Zimbabwe, citing concern about Zimbabwe's democracy. Yesterday, referring to the event that happened at the capital, shows that the America has no moral right to punish another nation under the guise of upholding democracy. These sanctions must end. So when all leaders are talking about what happened and people were blasting the United States of trying to be the holy thou in democracy, but look at what has happened. This is what we heard from President Mnangagwa. America has no moral rights. So what do you guys think about all this?
Well, first of all, I love when he uses guys. It just makes everything sound shady. But I think I honestly think he does have a point. But on the other hand, I might disagree. I'm almost in the middle because, to be fair, I've always thought that yes, the United States has positioned itself as the policeman of the entire world and is always poking its nose in the affairs of others, especially elections. But at the same time, whenever their elections are interfered with, there's a lot of outcry. And I'm like, well, if you can't take it, then don't dish it. But at the same time, when we look at what happened with the United States during this election, I would almost not say the United States per se. In my opinion, these are the actions of one individual with too much power who did not exactly recognize how much responsibility came with that power. So I wouldn't per se just blanketly categorize it as the United States acting in a way that is unbecoming, but more as an individual in a position of power misusing that power and inciting his base, because we need to realize that people are easily influenced, and when they do believe in someone by virtue of their position, their influence, their authority, they're more likely to just take whatever they tell them wholesale and not even think twice about it. Or let's say fewer people are going to think critically before they act. Most of them are just going to follow blindly. So I think that as much as he does have a point in that tweet, on the other hand, I don't think we should blanketly say the United States. It's more so an individual in a position of power in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with part of what Violet said, and I know the reaction from many African countries are like, "Yeah, you see who's the the third world country now." But the United States has something that most African countries still do not have. It's just they have their other institutions that can that can step in a situation like that and save the country, if I would put it that way. We don't have that. When one person in some of our African countries decide to rise and take all of the country hostage, most of the time they succeed. But here in America, what we saw, at least, they still have the Congress and other branches of government that were able to step in, and we hear that the House is preparing impeachment articles and things like that. I think what we should do in our African countries is to strengthen our governments and different institutions and become independent, so that when one person has so much power, like Violet has said, we have other institutions who are able to step in and save the country.
Yeah.
A little bit of pushback about this metaphysics of difference, which sounds colonialistic to me, is that when they use the word the United States, they can't be speaking to the people. It's about the leadership. And the leadership is what this exactly speaks to. The leadership makes the call at that level. And in responding to the issues, controversial issues in the United States, they just have to be the United States. To me, I won't find any issue, problematic with that. What sounds colonialistic is the concept of policing the world. It comes with this construction that they don't know the right thing to do. By imposing our sanctions, we'll try and whip them to line so that they will be able to behave more civilized. The the optics coming from the US, is such that makes everybody to be troubled. That if this is the headquarters, say to say, of civilization, of democratic civility in the world, and this is happening, then something is wrong with the process over there. It means there might be a need for somebody from elsewhere to also remind them that this is not how it is done. Just the same way, they take it as a moral responsibility to tell other parts of the world this is not how it is done. So there's always a need for somebody to play that role. And if countries, what we could have done as Africans is to have said, this is not how we do it. This is how it should be done. Not from this, what I call I don't know the right word to use now. When somebody becomes, subsumed and say that, I say, no, you police the world, you do this. I would have framed it that, no, this is how it should be done. And we want you to do it this way. And that will be communicating to the United States, setting the moral basis for righting what is wrong. And I like to correct something. There was no time that I know in modern democracy, and Peter, if I'm wrong, please step in, correct me about this, that a leader in Africa called to this process of, creating insecurity in the country directly because they felt they lost an election. To the best of my knowledge, when elections are disputed in Africa and the leader refuses to leave, it's either the opposition rises up just like they did in the US and they challenge the process. African Union, they step in, they challenge the process. There was no time a particular leader calls on his own supporter to attack the Senate, the Olu chambers. And I'm not aware of this. I'm not, and that shows that.
Well, I think there's a big difference. There's a very big difference because usually the incumbents have the key machinery of power behind them, right? So you don't call your supporters to come rally. You don't need that, but you use the politicized military and police to do that, right? But in the United States, there's that big line, and hopefully that line is never crossed between the military and the civilians. And the military in the United States has signaled to date and in unprecedented ways, arguably, that they will not get involved in a political dispute. So the only way and the only tool that's used is mob violence, right? So I would say that is the significant big difference. Like Yahya Jammeh, who I would argue was that quintessential incumbent who questioned his loss in his own sort of shambolic election process that he lost. he called on the military to stand by with him, and countless other countries have. So I would say that's the big difference.
He has used the military, the entire factions of the government to work for him. He was president for 32 years and the whole country was working for him. My parents used to tell him that they used to dance for the president in school and he had no thought about it. Really,
But I want to quibble with one thing that was said about sort of global learning going in one direction, right? Particularly on democracy. But I would also say we also think about learning from authoritarians, learning from one another. Now, I'm going to put up on the screen here a funny meme that was going around of the president of the United States watching the current president of Uganda, and the title, as you can see there, online course, how to stay in power forever, right? So that there is learning taking place. I think there is learning taking place, for better or for worse. And from my position, I tend to agree with Violet a bit, on these statements of criticisms of the U.S. I think it's less productive to sort of to point the wood in each other's eye, per se, but rather say that we all as countries need to hold each other accountable. Right. And I think the United States should continue to hold other countries accountable for human rights and democracy. But they should also be held accountable because that helps the United States improve as well, right? So it has to be seen as I think a global effort. And it doesn't necessarily mean, military interventions, right? Because oftentimes military interventions in countries, external interventions, oftentimes do not yield better results for human rights and democracy, which is often the go-to tool for some countries. Not necessarily sanctions either, right? But there has to be a global conversation that is taking place, that is from the major powers like the U.S., is taking place from a position of humility, which I'm hoping the current president will impart. It will be. It's hard to think of large foreign policy changes per se, but perhaps we will enter a new era of humility when it comes to commenting and discussing and supporting one another's efforts towards greater freedom and deepening democracy.
I mean, that's a very good point. But what is the role of the United Nations? Because when there is somebody that plays this role as one of the component countries in the world, then the issue we need to ask ourselves is the issue of power asymmetry. The power asymmetry itself means that the process is going to be skewed to the size of those that have greater power in the global political power equation. And that's the United States. And that is why many times the US is always left unchallenged. Globally, they don't pay for some of the atrocities that they've committed in different parts of the world that, qualifies as abuse of power. And in this situation, I would rather go for the strengthening of the United Nations, so that the United Nations plays this role, not necessarily a particular country in the world. And when we have these, and that will go back to changing a lot of things about the United Nations as well, so that this issue of power asymmetry that is enrolled in the institutional cell of the United Nations is also going to be addressed, so that each of these countries of the world, they have a say in how things are done. So that at the end of the day, it's not about one country becoming the policing of the world. But to me, it should be about every one of us being the police of the world. And in that way, everybody knows that we have to submit ourselves to the collective, not to the whims and caprices of an individual nation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of these engagements and this humility, perhaps, and consensus takes place in international institutions that need real conversations about institutions, about values within those institutions, which, as you say, Ghana, involves the major powers. And obviously, the incoming president, who will be inaugurated in a week and a half in the U.S., has signaled an embrace of multilateral institutions. But we'll see how that takes shape over the next weeks and months and years. Good. Really, really interesting conversation, Eva. You got us going on power transitions, both in Ghana as well as the US, and the perceptions of those transitions in the US. So moving on to
Wait,
you,
I have a
Violet.
question. I have a question. One, do you think that the one of the things that we didn't really address is President Mnangagwa saying that the sanctions must end? Do you think he has a point? Because Zimbabwe has been ripped with a lot of human rights abuses. The opposition party have suffered really in the hands of the president and past leaders. So does he have a say that those human rights, those sanctions must end? Even just yesterday, we had an information on Twitter that Hope Chinono, like the journalist that was arrested, was actually arrested again. You know, and they searched his house and things like that. These are all claims of human rights abuses, and that is the reason for the sanctions on him. So, do you think that Mnangagwa, do you think that even if they lift those sanctions on him, he's going to gear towards a path of unity in the country and also allowing the opposition party to be free and do whatever they want to do and also contribute to the development of the country instead of always intimidating them and throwing some of them in jail?
In my
Well,
opinion, I don't think that the sanctions should be lifted because, again, but I would say that it depends on the perspective through which you look at it. If Trump censors the actions of an individual, and again, if the United States had not stepped, like if the institutions and government had not stepped in to check him, then we might be able to blame the country and say, well, if you are acting in the United States and this is what you are doing, perhaps then you shouldn't be only authorized to maybe place sanctions on someone else, but these are the actions of an individual and their government can check them. And so I still think that if we separate the individual from the United as a whole, I think those sanctions need to be in place. We can't blame an individual actions on the entire country and then completely negate the reason why those sanctions were placed there in the first place, because the reason why they were put there was because of the gross abuses of humans. They stopped, and just because someone suggests lifting the sanctions doesn't mean that they are going to do better. If they wanted to do better, they should have done better by now. At least they should have started giving indicators of doing better. Just think that they are looking for loopholes, but I don't think that those sanctions should be taken away until Zimbabwe has proved otherwise. But that is my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Violet, what's on your mind? Maybe something about Zimbabwe as well. Since we've been on the subject of Zimbabwe, maybe not. I don't know. What's been on your mind?
Well, again, while we are in Zimbabwe, Netflix has added. So Netflix has added Zimbabwean billionaire Strive Masiyiwa to its board. But okay, that's a story for another day. But what's really brewing in my mind is the question about whether African billionaires are doing enough to COVID-19 on the African continent. So we all know that it's the governments that are leading this entire campaign against COVID-19, but then we also have a few billionaires on the continent. And the big question is, are they doing enough to make sure this is effectively dealt with? But so when we look for example, well, first of all, it's the biggest among the African countries. And of course, the big fish in the pond, Aliko Dangote, who is the continent's richest man, and he does have an estimated fortune of about 10 billion, has been on from the onset, and he has this call against COVID-19, which has raised a lot of money. I think almost 79 US dollars, and that has been in conjunction with the Nigerian Central Bank and other donors. And he has been heading this entire campaign, of which he has put in about $1.5 million of his own money. And this money is to raise to distribute food throughout the country, provide about 2,100 intensive care beds, about 600,000 test kits, and so many other things. And it's not Nigeria and Dangote. Within Nigeria itself, we do have other billionaires. I I'm not their names, but we have people like Denuga, Mike, who is, I think, the richest African. We do have people like Abdul Madrabi. Again, all those people each donated about 1 billion naira. I don't exactly remember how. It's about, I think, maybe 0.2 million US dollars. But then in South Africa as well, we do have people who are coming in, billionaires who are coming in with their governments to combat the virus. As much as President Cyril Ramaphosa has been at the forefront, we do have billionaires like the Oppenheimer family coming in to provide almost a third of the funding, and that's about $65 million. And we also have the second richest, like the Ruperts, who are also pledging about 1 billion rand, which is again about 65 million US dollars. And that's just not the entire bulk of everybody. There's so many that are coming. In Morocco, we have in Zimbabwe, we have, when I say it was just put on the board of Netflix, you on the other has taken a different approach. Instead of maybe say donating money directly, calling on leaders, religious leaders, his mayors, just like speak out to help virus at level, but also providing about 100,000 test kits to the most vulnerable groups, and ventilators. And so they are doing quite a bit alongside their governments, but there's this about, are they doing enough? In my opinion, I think that, again, social services and ahead of national crisis is really individual governments, but at the same time, we can also say, okay, there's individuals within who are disproportionately privileged, and they should do their fair share to make sure that the rest of the less are getting by comfortably. But I don't think that we need to place all our attention on the billionaires because they have this say, you're doing enough. I think just that they have come out and donated all this money that they really did not have to anyway is already good. And I think that the onus falls back on our government to be able to do better, plan better, and make sure that better safety social nets. I don't know what the team thinks, but that is what I think.
Interesting. So what does everyone else think? Have the wealthy on the continent done enough? And Violet, you gave us some of those figures. What do we think?
Well, it is hard to tell personally because I'm not very, very familiar with what each of them did or what they're doing. But from what Violet just shared now, it sounds as if a lot of it is going toward social services, helping people with food and test kits and all of that. But what I personally would wish that people who have the resources and the money would do is to invest into capacity building. I really would wish that we invest into capacity building, invest into our health institution, in infrastructure, like the trial that is going on in 13 African countries. As if I was a billionaire, not to say that provide safety net is not important. People need food, they need protection right now, and that needs to be provided. But at the same time, I think we need to be strategic in strengthening our capacity and our healthcare institution, funding our scientists who are doing great work on the African continent, make sure that we have labs, we have good hospitals, and we have strong infrastructure so that next time when we face another pandemic, we are better prepared to respond.
Right. And if I say something to what Gloria said, as much as we've seen some of the sums of these are providing, but still do have a question in my mind, and I'm like, okay, so if this money has been collected, we all know the state of corruption on the continent. How effectively is this money actually being used for what it is supposed to, and how much of it is likely to get stolen? Those are real questions that need to be asked, because at the end of the day, corruption does a lot in siphoning money that's supposed to be used for public service delivery. And as much as this money is coming in, is it actually all going to be used for what it needs to be used for? I think that is the question that needs to be asked, more than are they doing enough to,
Yeah,
to
I mean, that
get
was a
that.
very good question. And it came up in Nigeria when Dangote led the likes of Patedala and Isaac Rabiu and other stakeholders from the private sector to contribute money to dedicated to alleviating the consequences or brunt of COVID-19, particularly on the vulnerable in the society. They didn't just contribute the money, they also ensure that they have their eyes on the processes put in place to dispense the money, ensuring that the money gets to the right place. But a more interesting question, and which to me was raised by by Gloria, is this issue about responding to symptoms and fixing the problems. We are so lucky in Africa, not necessarily lucky per se. I think we were better prepared for COVID-19 because when somebody uses the word lucky, that is discounting how better prepared we were to manage COVID-19 compared to the developed countries of the world. But that said, there are issues of concerns in Africa. For example, we've not done a lot developing our own COVID-19 vaccine. One could have expected that doing enough should have gone in this direction. Because we have the scientists. We have the scientists either within Africa or in the diaspora communities across the world. Pulling those scientists together, uh, working with some universities in African countries, uh, challenging them to come up with COVID-19 vaccine could have been a big game changer. And this is where the billionaires in Africa need to do better. When you look at education in Africa, they don't do well. I've always complained to colleagues that when you go to universities in the US, you see endowment, money coming from billionaires to support universities. You know, it's not just until we have pandemic. Dangote, what is the effect of Dangote in Nigerian universities? I don't really know. Is there a particular lab that Dangote alone is funding? Is there a particular lab that Otedola is funding with his money? And when you look at all these guys, the way they make their money is because of the labs institutional setup in Africa. A lot of regulations are being waived or they are being lessened for Dangote to strive and make more money in the country because they believe that they just want to keep him to be rich and richer and richer and richer. But is he giving more back to the society? I don't think so. So one challenge to them is this. I know it's their money. We don't have the right to tell them how they should spend their money, but I believe they need to give back more to African countries. And one of the ways they can actually do this during this particular of COVID-19 is to support our scientists from different African countries, challenge them with the financial resources so required for us to develop our own local indigenous vaccine. The scientists that are working on this vaccine in the US, one of the scientists actually did his undergraduate degree in Nigeria. And this is first degree medicine in Nigeria. And if the foundation was poor, there is nothing he could have built upon in the US when he came for his graduate program. So meaning that there is still something that we can build upon to do something. And this is where they need to do things differently. They need to stop treating our people with this mentality that they are poor, they need money. No, this mentality of treating people, this is the same way that developed countries they treat African countries. They always think the solution to our problem is to give us peanut. That's not the solution to our problem. Because when we develop a vaccine, we can also sell to different parts of the world. And it's going to save a massive amount of money. because buying vaccines from fellow African countries based on the money that this billionaire have used to support the development of the vaccine will save a lot of massive financial resources that we're going to spend the money to import vaccine either from the US, from China, or wherever. And I think this is where the challenge is. This is where we need to tell them, this is what we want. Support our continent that have made you guys. Because, without the lapse institutional setup in Africa, possibly some of these guys will be billionaires. They will be billionaires. Particularly, look at a lot of benefit that Dangote is getting from the Nigerian government. I've always spoken against it. That we've created all necessary opportunities for Dangote to become a billionaire. It controls the monopoly. Point in time in the cement industry, in the sugar industry, any fool can become a billionaire with a monopoly. And this is a concerning issue to me.
Totally agree. Completely agree with what Ghana said. That is what we need. Invest in things that have long-term, that can provide long-term sustainability for our countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hear out there,
true.
well, I'm hearing the sound of the talking drum, which means that we are at the end of our show today. So I want to
Already?
thank everyone for our lively conversation today. It sounds like the new year is going to have some of the similar challenges to the old year, but that's always to be expected. But we're marching forward and we want to keep this conversation going. So thank you for joining us, and join in the conversation on our Discord platform. And in the meantime, continue the conversation and access all of Leaders of Africa content by subscribing to our YouTube channel and hitting that notification bell to know when all of that new content goes live. So thank you again for joining us. That's all for this week. Now it is time to go off to next week. So thanks and have a wonderful week ahead. Bye-bye.